So how are you approaching the rest of the weekend? I mean, obviously hoping to find better balance in FP3, I guess, and what would be a good weekend for you then in the end, do you think?
Yeah, I still have hope and there's potential in this car, and it's just my question to the guys is like, there are certain issues that we have. I'm like, these are my problems, help me fix them. You know, like what can we do to improve our ride and the bouncing that we have? So, and the understeer. So if we can fix those going into P3, then I think we could be in a slightly better position. I mean, the first and second sector, I was right there. Pace-wise, wasn't so bad. It's just when you got to third sector, I was losing like 7/10. So if I can fix that tomorrow, I think we can do better.
Ferrari's garage went dead silent today, and no one saw it coming. The FIA just launched an official investigation into Lewis Hamilton's SF25 after something bizarre showed up in FP2 data on the final race weekend. We're talking about suspicious ride height shifts, an unexpected pace drop, and radio messages Ferrari definitely didn't want broadcast. This is the kind of drama formula one never admits publicly. Subscribe now and stay locked in, because what's happening behind closed doors at Ferrari is just getting started. It started with a glitch, or so they thought. During FP2, Hamilton's SF25 suddenly lost rear grip through turn 14. The onboard replay looked normal, but Ferrari's telemetry told a different story. The ride height dropped by millimeters, the rear tire pressures fluctuated, and the energy deployment map shifted mid-corner. Engineers froze. What initially appeared as a routine loss of rear-end stability triggered a full review, and just minutes later, the FIA sent an official inquiry request to Ferrari's pit wall. Inside the garage, silence fell. Mechanics closed Hamilton's garage shutters, halfway a subtle sign in Formula One that something's wrong. Leclerc, who was still out on track, radioed in asking, "Why is Hamilton's car shut down?" His engineer gave a vague reply, but Charles wasn't buying it. Ferrari was clearly rattled, and the contrast between the two cars was becoming impossible to ignore. The mood had shifted. This was no longer a normal Friday in Abu Dhabi. From a performance standpoint, the numbers told a strange story. Hamilton's long-run pace had been erratic. On medium compounds, he was losing 0.3 per lap to Leclerc, not massive, but inconsistent. Then came a sudden pace spike on softs during a low-fuel run. The lap was clean. Too clean. It raised suspicions not only internally, but also among rival teams monitoring GPS overlays. His SF25 rotated better through sectors 2 and 3 than it had all year. Was it driver brilliance or something else? Ferrari's internal review found something they couldn't explain. A sudden spike in battery deployment during deceleration in turn 10 showed a behavior not mapped into the expected energy recovery cycle. The system shouldn't have released that much power at that point in the lap, not without a manual override or an unusual input. But Hamilton didn't press anything. He was driving normally. That left only one explanation: a possible systems error or an unauthorized setting. The FIA's technical delegate was seen entering the Ferrari garage less than 30 minutes later. He wasn't smiling. Ferrari's technical director, Enrico Cardillo, followed him in, and the two were locked in a data room for over an hour. What they were reviewing hasn't been confirmed, but insiders believe it was related to MGUK deployment behavior. If that system delivered power outside the legal parameters, even briefly, it could lead to a full post-session investigation and sanctions. Meanwhile, Hamilton remained calm. He spoke with his race engineer over the radio about the car's balance and seemed unaware of the storm brewing behind the scenes. But at one point he asked, "Are we cleared on all systems?" A strange question. Drivers don't usually bring that up unless something feels wrong. Was it intuition? A coded message? No one knows. But the tension in his voice was audible. He knew something wasn't right with the SF25. This was supposed to be Ferrari's last chance to strike in 2025. But now their weekend is at risk of being derailed before qualifying even begins. With the FIA involved, any irregularity, even a minor sensor glitch, can snowball into a technical infringement. And if Hamilton's car is found to have benefited from anything outside the regulations, penalties could follow. One thing is clear: Ferrari isn't just fighting for lap time anymore. They're fighting for control of their weekend. Ferrari entered Abu Dhabi trying to stabilize a car that had behaved unpredictably for most of the season, but the first signs of trouble appeared as soon as Hamilton began his FP1 installation laps. His engineer expected the usual data signature from a revised rear suspension package, yet the load distribution was inconsistent. The car generated more rear compression than forecasted at the exit of slow corners, suggesting an unintended flexibility in the system. On a normal Friday, this would simply be logged for overnight evaluation, but with the final race of the year at stake, any irregularity instantly became a source of concern. As Hamilton moved into performance runs, the discrepancy grew. His SF25 achieved stronger rotation in the medium speed sections than simulations had predicted. Ferrari had introduced a softer rear setup to improve tire life, but the numbers Hamilton produced looked like the car was benefiting from more aerodynamic support than expected. When the rear of the car holds better than the aero model shows, the cause is either excellent driving instinct or mechanical behavior that needs explanation. This is precisely the type of detail that triggers the scrutiny of officials. Charles Leclerc's car provided the contrast that deepened the worry. His setup was nearly identical, and he reported the same baseline changes, yet his sector times aligned perfectly with the projected model. Leclerc told the team over radio that the car felt stable but slightly limited on rotation, exactly what Ferrari expected. Hamilton's radio was the opposite. He described the rear as strangely planted in some corners and suddenly loose in others. That kind of split behavior is exactly the scenario that suggests a system operating outside its intended window. Ferrari analysts quickly discovered irregular pressure traces coming from Hamilton's rear left corner. The pressure curve showed a dip during lateral load that did not appear in Leclerc's data, nor in any previous runs this season. A dip like that can indicate a damper behaving in a non-linear way under stress. The danger is that if such irregularity gives the car stability at the precise moment it should destabilize, it provides performance the regulations do not permit. Whether accidental or not makes no difference to the FIA. From that moment on, Ferrari's leadership knew they had a problem. They could not determine whether the behavior came from a component tolerance, an assembly detail, or a software mapping that ignored variation thresholds. But they also knew the FIA had access to the same live telemetry channels. In modern Formula One, it takes only one unexplained value to trigger a compliance request. Hamilton's spike in turn 10 was more than enough. It forced Ferrari to move from performance analysis into legal defense. The team brought Hamilton back into the garage for a series of system resets, but those resets created a second issue. Resetting core systems mid-session can alter energy deployment patterns, and the FIA monitors such patterns closely. After Hamilton returned to the track, the car behaved differently, but not consistently enough to prove the issue was resolved. Ferrari engineers began debating whether the initial irregularity came from the damper or from the regenerative mapping that governs battery behavior. Neither explanation was comfortable for a team under examination. By the end of FP2, the technical tension inside Ferrari was unmistakable. Hamilton's pace was strong enough to show potential, but the data behind that pace did not align with the parameters the FIA requires. Leclerc's clean sessions meant Ferrari could not argue that the track or the model was wrong. Instead, they were forced to confront the possibility that one car had drifted outside the limits without intention. The risk now is clear. If Ferrari cannot prove the anomaly was benign, the FIA will escalate the investigation further. And with qualifying approaching, time is no longer on their side. As the paddock emptied after FP2, Ferrari's technical staff locked themselves in their data room, working deep into the Abu Dhabi night. The goal was not just performance improvement, it was legal protection. The engineering team had one objective: isolate the anomaly on Hamilton's SF25 before the FIA's morning review. Every lap, every corner load, and every sensor spike was reprocessed. They weren't tuning a race car anymore. They were building a defense. The first step was hardware. Ferrari mechanics stripped the rear suspension assembly and inspected each damper, spring, and bushing by hand. The components were clean, no signs of failure or deformation. Yet, the problem had never been mechanical wear. It was about response curves under dynamic load. The team reinstalled new components with identical specifications, hoping to eliminate any margin of variance introduced during FP1 assembly. This was routine in practice, but now it carried legal implications. Next came software. Engineers reviewed the energy deployment map line by line, focusing on the kinetic motor generator, unit, the system responsible for harvesting and deploying electrical energy under braking and acceleration. What they discovered raised eyebrows. A historical calibration table had been reloaded from a previous race one where conditions allowed for a more aggressive recovery mode. This table, while not illegal on its own, was not approved in pre-event scrutineering. It was enough to justify FIA interest. Ferrari immediately flagged the discovery to the FIA, submitting a voluntary disclosure to avoid the appearance of concealment. In doing so, they hope to turn a potential infraction into a technical clarification. The problem, however, is timing. Such clarifications are usually processed weeks in advance, not hours before a qualifying session. The FIA acknowledged receipt but declined to comment, a sign that the issue had moved into formal compliance review. Meanwhile, simulator operators back in Maranello were tasked with recreating the exact FP2 behavior. They loaded Hamilton's telemetry into the virtual car and replicated the same corner sequences, using both the old and new deployment maps. The results were clear. The outdated calibration delivered more stability during lift and coast entries, precisely the behavior seen in the real car. The simulator confirmed what the data already suggested: this was not a driver illusion. The SF25 had behaved differently for a reason. Overnight, Ferrari issued new instructions to both Hamilton and Leclerc for FP3. The goal was to unify car behavior and demonstrate compliance. But internally, everyone understood the deeper issue. If the FIA rules that the map gave Hamilton a competitive advantage, even unintentionally penalties could apply. The most likely would be exclusion from FP2 results or limitations on qualifying components. In a worst-case scenario, Ferrari could be forced to revert to older parts, compromising their final race setup.